The sky tears open above New York, not with an alien invasion, but with celebration. Crowds chant a single name. Banners of green and gold ripple across nations. Soldiers kneel. Presidents bow. And from the balcony of a palace that was once the United Nations, a single figure, Asgard, unstoppable, victorious. This is not the world you know. This is the world after Loki won. But how did the God of Mischief become the king of Earth? And why does the planet now tremble beneath its own ruler? It began on a night when the sky felt heavy with something unspoken. The Avengers were fractured, exhausted from the Chitauri invasion that nearly swallowed Manhattan. Tony buried himself in armored designs. Thor was trapped in Asgard, handling the aftermath of the Bifrost's collapse. And Steve Rogers struggled to navigate a century he didn't belong in. Loki saw the cracks forming and understood the simplest truth. You don't conquer the strongest fortress by breaking down the walls. You conquer it by slipping through the door they forgot to lock. With the Tesseract housed securely in a side vault underground, security was iron tight, but Loki didn't need brute force. He needed influence. He re-emerged publicly not with threats, but with a proposition, a gesture of peace, a plea for asylum. He walked willingly into shielded custody, cloak torn, magic suppressed, his voice trembling in a carefully crafted performance. He spoke of Asgardian politics, of being hunted, of wanting redemption. Nick Fury didn't trust him, but the world did. Loki knew how to speak to pain, to confusion, to anger. Earth was vulnerable. Leadership shaken. Governments desperate for stability. In quiet conversations behind soundproof walls, Loki sowed whispers like seeds. What if the world had one voice, instead of 1,000 arguing ones? What if humanity had a ruler wise enough to avoid war, powerful enough to stop it, and eternal enough to guide nations for generations? What if, for once, Earth didn't need heroes-only order? The turning point came when a coordinated series of global crises unfolded. Manipulated storms, rogue military strikes, cyber attacks, each perfectly timed to prove humanity's fragility. Loki didn't claim responsibility. He didn't have to. He merely offered solutions. His illusions became evidence. His magic became security. His charisma became law. S.H.I.E.L.D. grew suspicious, but world governments grew dependent. And the moment they agreed to let him temporarily oversee emergency stabilization measures, Loki stepped into the role he had always believed was destined for him. A ruler, a savior, a god. Yet even he knew the Avengers were the final obstacle. So he approached them not with violence, but with truth. Or at least the version of it he wanted them to believe. He offered unity, peace, a world where no alien invasions would threaten them again. A world where heroes wouldn't need to bleed for causes politicians destroyed. Steve resisted. Tony questioned. Natasha doubted. But the world wanted answers, and Loki was the only one providing them. Still, there was one Avenger he couldn't predict, one whose grief twisted into suspicion sharper than any blade. Clint Barton, the man Loki once controlled. The man who still carried the nightmares of his own compromised mind. He watched Loki rise, and he knew something was terribly wrong. As Loki gave his first public address, speaking of harmony and order, Barton slipped into the shadows of the city, bow drawn, resolve hardened. Someone had to uncover the truth before Earth's new protector became its permanent king. The world began to change in ways so subtle that at first, no one noticed. Flags were redesigned to incorporate green. Public broadcasts began with a ceremonial salute to global unity. Government leaders made decisions suspiciously aligned with Loki's philosophy. Every nation kept its name, its anthem, its borders, but all bowed to a single sovereign. Loki's crown was metaphorical at first, a symbol of empowerment he claimed was granted by the people. But behind the scenes, magic was tightening around world leaders like invisible chains. Clint Barton's suspicions grew with every passing day. He found patterns no one else could cease. Surveillance cameras subtly enchanted. Military units unknowingly following illusions. News anchors speaking with turns of phrase that felt rehearsed, artificial. Even S.H.I.E.L.D., the one organization unshaken by gods, began losing ground. Agents disappeared on simple reconnaissance missions. Files rewritten themselves. Fury's war room monitors flickered with distorted images of Loki's face, smiling as if the building's very systems had bent the knee. With no official mandate, Clint went rogue. He tracked strange magical signatures across the globe, small, quiet pockets of chaos that only someone once touched by Loki's mind could detect. In an abandoned facility on the outskirts of Berlin, he found the truth. Loki wasn't simply manipulating leaders. He was replacing them, not with shapeshifters, not with robots, with perfect magical duplicates crafted from illusion and memory, puppeted by Loki's own consciousness. The original leaders were being held in stasis chambers deep underground, their minds trapped in blissful dream worlds where they believed they still ruled. The moment Clint transmitted his findings to Fury, the power grid collapsed. Every screen across the world went black. Every satellite shut down. For a full minute, Earth was silent. Then Loki appeared. A global broadcast, simple, elegant, absolute. He stood in a grand hall that resembled an Asgardian throne room, fused with Earth's most iconic architecture. His voice was calm, soothing, drenched in that hypnotic confidence only he possessed. He admitted everything, the illusions, the duplicates, the manipulation, and he framed it all as a necessary sacrifice to protect humanity from itself. They were never fit to rule, he said softly, almost regretfully. But I am. Across the planet, millions listened in awe rather than fear. Crime rates had dropped. Wars had halted. Nations that once hated each other were now cooperating, unified under a single guiding voice. For the first time in centuries, Earth had stability. And many began to wonder, what if Loki truly was the best ruler they ever had? But Clint wasn't swayed. He knew the difference between peace and captivity. He approached the Avengers, what remained of the Mand, tried to ignite the spark of resistance. Bruce hesitated. Natasha analyzed. Tony R. argued. And Steve refused to let a tyrant reign, no matter how polished the throne. But Loki had already prepared for this. With a single gesture, he appeared before them in a flash of emerald light, no longer hiding his authority. He made them an offer. Join him, serve him, and shape the world alongside him, or be erased from the future he was building. The room went still. Tony opened his mouth to respond, when suddenly the air rippled. A sound like thunder rolling backward tore through the compound, and from the distortion stepped someone none of them expected. Thor. And he did not come with diplomacy. He came with rage. Thor struck the ground with Mjolnir so hard the walls shook, scattering papers and equipment like leaves in a storm. His eyes burned with a fury the Avengers had rarely seen, an older, deeper anger born not from betrayal, but from heartbreak. Loki did not flinch. He only smiled, serene, amused, as though the arrival of the god of thunder were a minor inconvenience. "Brother," Thor growled, the word heavy with disappointment. "I have watched from Asgard as you bent realms to your will. But this is enslavement." Loki stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back, wearing the calm poise of a king addressing an unruly general. "Enslavement," he repeated softly. "I have given them peace, order, a world free of chaos. Something you, in all your storms and thunder, could never provide." Steve stepped between them before Thor could answer. "This isn't peace," he said firmly. "It's obedience." Loki's gaze flicked to him, measuring, curious before returning to his brother. "They worship me now, Thor, not out of fear, but out of gratitude. Why destroy what they have accepted willingly?" Thor raised his hammer, lightning crackling across his armor. "Because their will is not yours to claim." The strike came faster than any of them expected. A blast of lightning exploded through the room, engulfing Loki's form. The impact shredded walls, burned through consoles, and sent the Avengers diving for cover. When the smoke cleared, a scorched crater marked the place where Loki stood. Except Loki was behind Thor now, untouched. His voice brushed against the back of Thor's neck like cold breath. "I outgrew your lightning long ago." A surge of emerald energy erupted, flinging Thor across the compound, smashing him into steel beams that bent under the force. Natasha rushed in, firing shock rounds. Tony's suit activated mid-stride, and Steve launched forward with his shield. But Loki's magic was everywhere, multiplying into dozens of illusions that danced between them, each whispering different truths, different threats, different promises. Cliff fired an arrow straight through the heart of one only, for it to vanish in a cloud of shimmering dust. Tony unleashed a barrage of repulsors, but for every illusion that shattered, two more took its place. The air became a maze of green light, distorted voices, and shifting shadows. Steve pushed forward, carving a path with his shield until he reached the real Loki, only to be caught in a binding spell that locked his limbs in place. Tony surged to help, but Loki snapped his fingers, and Tony's suit shut down completely, collapsing him to the ground in a heap of metal. Thor rose again, battered, furious, and for a moment, he and Loki faced each other in silence. Two brothers, two gods, one throne. "You leave me no choice," Thor whispered. "And you leave me no challenge," Loki replied. With a twist of his hand, Loki unleashed a beam of raw magic that tore through the compound and swallowed Thor whole, sending him crashing through the floor into darkness below. By the time the Avengers recovered, Loki was already gone. All that remained was the echo of his voice drifting through the cracked speakers overhead, calm and triumphant. "You cannot stop me. Earth has already chosen its king." And in that moment, somewhere deep beneath the compound, Thor struggled to rise, knowing that this time, the fate of Earth might depend not on strength, but on forgiveness. Thor pulled himself from the rubble, every breath sharp with pain, not physical pain, but the ache of watching his brother fall deeper into darkness than ever before. Mjolnir flickered with fading sparks as he forced himself to stand. If Loki was to be stopped, it would not be with rage. It would be with something Loki had never understood: compassion. But the world above was collapsing into a new kind of silence, one born not from chaos, but from order so absolute it suffocated everything human. Cities glowed under towering holograms of Loki's crown silhouette. Drone patrols in emerald armor soared across skylines. Streets were quiet, too quiet, citizens moving with a strange serenity, as if guided by a single unseen rhythm. The illusion of harmony had become a cage, and in the heart of this new empire, Loki ascended the steps to his throne in what was once the United Nations, now rebuilt into a shimmering palace of magic and metal. As Loki sat upon it, the world bowed, and for a moment he closed his eyes, letting the wave of reverence wash over him. This was the dream he had chased for centuries: a throne, a kingdom, worship, validation, everything he had been denied in Asgard, everything Odin never gave him, everything Thor never thought he deserved. But something unexpected pierced the moment, a quiet voice, one he hadn't heard in years. Loki, he turned. He wasn't Thor. He wasn't an Avenger. He was Frigga. Not her physical form, only a projection, pulled from the remnants of magic still echoing across realms. A memory, a warning. A mother's love turned into a message powerful enough to transcend death. "My son," she whispered, her eyes filled with warmth. "You seek a throne to prove your worth, but you will never find the love you crave by ruling those who fear you." Loki's breath faltered. For a moment, just a moment, the mask cracked. The god, the conqueror, the king vanished, leaving behind the child who once reached for a father who never reached back. But grief hardened quickly into cruelty. "Even in death, you cling to your illusions," he hissed. "Earth accepts me. Earth needs me. And no one, not you, not Thor, not the Avengers, will take this from me." The projection faded, leaving Loki alone again, truly alone. Above the city, the Avengers regrouped on a rooftop battered by the winds of Loki's magic. Tony's suit flickered back to life through manual overrides. Natasha tended to Steve's burns. Bruce watched the sky with clenched fists, afraid of losing control. And Clint stood with his bow lowered, eyes fixed on the palace glowing in the distance. "He's broken," Clint said quietly. "Not evil, broken." Thor joined them moments later, battered but alive, lightning still crackling around him. He looked not like a warrior, but like a brother, desperate for one last chance. "I know what I must do," Thor said. "No plan, no strategy, only a final confrontation, heart against ambition." The Avengers moved with him, not to kill Loki, but to stand with Thor. To give him the one thing Loki had never been given: hope. As they reached the palace doors, the world seemed to hold its breath. Loki stood atop the steps, magic swirling around him like a storm crowned with light. "Brother," Thor called, voice echoing across the chamber. "I will not fight you." Loki hesitated, uncertain. "I will not raise my hammer," Thor continued. "Not because you are stronger, but because I refuse to lose you again." The storm of magic around Loki trembled. "You have conquered Earth," Thor said. "But if this throne costs you love, then you have conquered nothing." For the first time since his rise to power, Loki's expression wavered, a single crack in the armor. But before he could answer, alarms blared across the palace. The illusions maintaining his perfect empire began to glitch. Magical constructs flickered. Screens trembled. Somehow, somewhere, millions of people had awakened from Loki's subtle influence. A wave of consciousness spread like wildfire. The spell was breaking, and Loki realized his empire was crumbling not because of the Avengers, but because humanity had remembered what freedom felt like. He looked at his brother, a storm of emotions twisting behind his eyes: fear, anger, longing, regret. In the end, he ran. A burst of green light flashed, and Loki vanished, leaving the throne behind. The palace fell silent, and Earth took its first free breath in months. The world slowly rebuilt, shaken but wiser. The Avengers strengthened their bonds, knowing how close they came to losing everything. Thor searched the realms for his brother, hoping someday Loki would choose redemption over power. But the shadow of the God of Mischief lingered somewhere, plotting, grieving, waiting. For Loki had tasted what he always craved: a throne, a kingdom, worship. And though Earth reclaimed its freedom, one simple truth remained: a king who runs is still a king who dreams. And Loki's dreams are never truly over.